New developments in the murder of Stephen Lawrence.
I still can't understand seeing somebody at a bus stop and you pounce on that person and take their life.
The mother of two beaten to death outside her home. And the shocking rise in hate crime.
Do you understand how hated you really are in England?
Live from Eltham in South London, this is Crimewatch. Good evening and welcome to Crimewatch. Each week we are travelling the country, broadcasting from major crime scenes. Tonight, on the eve of what would have been Stephen Lawrence's 42nd birthday, we're live from Eltham in South London. Stephen was just 18 and an aspiring architect when he was chased down and murdered by a gang just a few metres down the road from where we are now. We'll have new developments in the case and for the first time, a full Crimewatch reconstruction. But first, let's check in with Tina in the incident room to see what else we have for you this evening.
Well, as ever, we have a team of police detectives standing by to take your calls on tonight's cases, including the fatal shooting of grandfather Jim Stanton. Plus, we reveal how, despite vast amounts of evidence, the murderer of 17-year-old Melanie Rose managed to evade capture for more than 3 decades.
There's no other case where you have such compelling evidence available to you. All you needed was the other bit that was going to join it up, which was your suspect. The hard bit was, where on earth were we going to find him?
In a few minutes, we will be speaking live to the detective now in charge of the Stephen Lawrence investigation about the new leads that we need your help with. Before we do, here's a reminder of what we know so far.
An 18-year-old boy has been stabbed to death in what police have described as a senseless racial attack. Stephen Lawrence was killed...
On April the 22nd, 1993, Stephen Lawrence and his friend Dwayne Brooks were on their way home when they were attacked. Stephen was stabbed twice, but managed to run about 100 yards before collapsing and bleeding to death.
Hundreds of people have taken part in a vigil in southeast London tonight in protest against...
The impact of this single tragic act of brutality would reverberate through the next 2 decades. From the beginning, the Metropolitan Police were accused of not having investigated the murder properly. Following several failed prosecutions, a public inquiry was held. The subsequent Macpherson report concluded that Stephen had been failed by a force infected with institutional racism. It made 70 recommendations, including a change to the law allowing for people to be prosecuted twice for the same crime if new evidence came to light. Finally, in 2012, 2 of the original 5 suspects, Gary Dobson and David Norris, were convicted of Stephen's murder at the Old Bailey. The court heard microscopic amounts of Stephen's DNA and fibres from his clothing were found on the defendant's clothes. They were both given life sentences. A murder which changed policing, but which was, above all, a tragedy for a family. Now, for the first time, Crimewatch reconstructs what we understand actually happened on that evening here in Eltham. And just so you are aware, the following film contains some racist language.
He didn't die by an accident. Somebody deliberately took his life. And that's what I want people to remember.
I still can't understand seeing somebody at a bus stop and you and your friends decide to pounce on that person and take their life. I wanted my son to be famous from the buildings that he made, not being dead.
Why should he be denied his life because of the colour of his skin?
Stephen Lawrence had spent most of Thursday the 22nd of April 1993 at Blackheath Bluecoat School. The 18-year-old was studying for A-levels in design and technology and English.
Stephen was so gifted that when he had his work experience with an architect, he did the model for the building that was being planned. And the man was so pleased with what he did that he said to him that, when you finish your training, I want you to come back and work with me. That shows you how gifted he was.
At around 6 p.m. that evening, Stephen went to his uncle's house, where he met up with his friend, Dwayne Brooks, and played computer games.
Wait for him to fling it.
He was no different from any other teenager. You know, he was an academic, you know, he's always been that. But at the same time, he would want to be out with his friends. So he was just an ordinary young man.
A few hours later, they started the journey home. Dwayne was heading to Charlton and Stephen to neighbouring Woolwich, both in southeast London. Due to strikes that night on certain routes, they caught a bus to Eltham High Street, where they hoped to find connections home. There they switched onto the 286 bus, but realising going on that route would get them home late, they changed buses again. This time on Well Hall Road in Eltham, where they had a choice of faster routes. Unsure of which bus to catch, Dwayne returned south to the junction of Dixon Road to check if he could see one coming. At that point, a group of 5 or 6 youths approached from the direction of Rochester Way.
You don't see it? No, I can't see it. Whoa, nigga!
The brutal attack lasted seconds. Stephen managed to get up.
Come on. Dwayne. Dwayne! Dwayne, look at me. Tell me what's wrong. Just keep running. Dwayne! Dwayne!
But he collapsed after running 100 meters. He had been stabbed twice and was bleeding from 2 deep wounds.
Normally, I'd like for him to come home at 10 o'clock. So it's after 10, coming up 11. And I knock on the door. I was told that he saw Stephen being attacked by a group of boys down at Wellard Road.
Come on, man. Come on, Stephen, mate. Stephen, can you hear me, mate? Hey? Someone help me.
So we head to the hospital. We saw a doctor and a nurse coming towards us. Also, his friend Dwayne was being accompanied by a police officer. And then we said to Dwayne, "Where is Stephen?" The doctor and the nurse answered us and said that they've got him and they're looking after him. So we've got to go into a waiting room and wait for them to come back. So about half an hour or so, they came back, and then the nurse told us that he was dead.
After that, everything just is like fast forward. It's a drama playing out in front of you, that you're not part of that. And it's like, no, he's not, you know, because it's hard to believe that all of a sudden somebody was just full of life and all of a sudden they've just lost their life.
We asked if we could see him. And I still can't remember whether or not I went in by myself or both me and my wife went in together. Well, I remember seeing him lying on the slab and touching him and thinking that he's still warm and he looked as if he was sleeping.
It's been over 2 decades since this junction was a major crime scene, but items recovered back then are still revealing new clues. A leather strap found a few yards from the attack scene and believed to have been discarded at the time has been re-examined using the latest forensic techniques. It's known that straps like this were used locally as a way of securing weapons to people's hands. DNA found on the strap suggests that it belonged to a female. Detectives would like to speak to the owner of that strap. Recently reviewed CCTV taken from that fateful day may also be crucial. It shows a man wearing a very distinctive jacket with a V on the back in an off-licence in Eltham. It's known a man wearing a jacket like this was also in the vicinity of the attack, but despite repeated appeals, he's never been traced.
One small little bit of information can bring it all together. There's people out there that might just have that one small little detail for us to put a closure on this, and I'm begging them and asking them, please, just come forward and give the information, and let's put a closure on this long-running tragedy.
I know sometimes it's very difficult, that people, they feel threatened or whatever, but I'd like them to have confidence and to come forward and speak up. It doesn't matter how small the information that they have, that any little thing could be very important. He died because these men decided they were going to take his life, and they should be punished for it.
I'm here with senior investigator Chris LePere. Stephen Lawrence was attacked on the corner down there and ran this way, and you're looking for one item in particular, information about it, aren't you?
That is correct. Beside where Stephen dropped his bag was found his blood and a strap. Now, I know that strap was not owned by Stephen. Stephen didn't leave it there. I believe it was left by the suspects. Now, we have managed to obtain a full female DNA profile from that strap. We have conducted mass DNA screening, and unfortunately, still to date, we haven't been able to identify that individual.
So we are hoping, are we, to find the witness who was in the CCTV?
Yeah, absolutely. We have CCTV taken from an off-licence some 2.5 hours previously, who is wearing a distinctive jacket with a V design on that jacket. Now, he may or may not be the same person seen by witnesses at the time in the vicinity of where Stephen was murdered.
And that's the sketch there?
That is the sketch. That was taken in 1993. As I say, he may or may not be the same person seen in the CCTV, but I would like to identify both persons.
Okay, now we are just here at the plaque, which is in the place where Stephen Lawrence fell and died, and you are now offering a reward for information that leads to a prosecution.
That is correct. The Metropolitan Police is offering up to £20,000 for information leading to the identification, arrest and prosecution of persons involved in Stephen's murder.
Because the last Crimewatch appeal actually tantalisingly close, didn't it?
No, absolutely. We're seeking a male who rang to Crimewatch in 2013 and then later to Crime Stoppers. I believe he has significant information, and I would ask him to ring back.
Thank you very much indeed. Chris LePere, the senior investigating officer. Well, 2 men have been convicted for Stephen Lawrence's murder, but it's obviously vital that everyone else who was involved in taking his life is caught and punished. And we do have a phone number for you, which you can ring us on Crimewatch to give information. 08085 600 600. Calls are free from landlines and from mobiles. More details are on the Crimewatch website. Tina.
Well, it's time now for our CCTV roundup, and we've got some particularly cunning crooks this month, so keep your eyes peeled. It's a rainy Wednesday in Smethwick in the West Midlands, and this guy has come prepared. He's got an umbrella for the weather and a gun for a bank job. According to police, he asks for cash in such a calm manner that the customers next to him don't realise for a while that they are in the middle of an armed robbery. The cashier is forced to hand over money and he goes to leave. Not without his brolly, though. Police believe this man is responsible for several other relaxed robberies in the area, totalling £20,000. If you want to see the full footage of all the incidents, then visit the Crimewatch website. And if you know who he is, please get in touch. Rush hour, outside the Elephant and Castle shopping centre in South London. Keep your eyes on the man with the phone. He's taking a keen interest in a scooter rider who's preparing to leave. What happens next is too shocking to show in full. Without warning, he lunges and stabs the biker in front of terrified passers-by. The victim runs inside to get help and is later treated in hospital for a large stab wound to his back. Police say this is the suspect entering the shopping centre before the stabbing. Take a long, hard look. Someone knows who this knife-wielding attacker is. He needs to be caught. It's the early hours of a July morning at a chicken shop in Birmingham. A man dressed in black enters the shop backwards. He turns and, according to the worker, shouts "Bhai" aggressively, a Hindi term for brother. As the shop worker approaches the counter, the customer pulls out a shotgun and fires it towards the kitchen ceiling. He then runs away towards Small Heath Park. Listen again, see if you can recognise his voice. This man is armed and dangerous. Can you tell us who he is? It's a perfectly normal day in Grimsby back in March. Apart from these three men dressed in white boiler suits, armed with two hammers and a machete. As they start smashing their way into a jeweller's, the worker bravely tries to fight them off, but is forced to witness the shop being torn apart. The men break into cabinets and window displays, managing to nab nearly £140,000 worth of watches. When they've had their fill, they run back towards their getaway car. Here they are a few minutes later, running away from the dumped car and stripping off at the same time. Police want to find these men, but would also like to identify the man pictured here. He was seen in the store just over a week before the robbery and may have vital information. Get dialing if you can name any of them. Call or text us if you recognise any of that lot. Text will be charged at your standard message rate. And remember, you can follow all of the developments during the programme on our new Live Updates webpage.
6 months ago, antiques expert Robin Mercer was found battered to death outside her family home in Molesey in Surrey. She'd been hit over the head multiple times with what police believe may have been a type of machete. Her body lay undiscovered for hours. Well, tonight detectives want your help to solve her gruesome killing. DCI Paul Remarsh, who's leading the hunt for Robin's killer, or killers, is here. And just talk us through, Paul, what we know.
Well, at about 9 p.m. on Sunday the 13th of March, we believe Robin had gone outside to put something in the bins outside the front of her house, having had a family meal. Her body was discovered the following morning at about 8 a.m. At the end of the driveway by the back gate. And the post-mortem revealed that she'd been hit once to the front of the head and then struck several times whilst on the floor. We believe the weapon was some sort of an axe or a machete, and we're appealing for any information from anybody who knows anything about that weapon to contact us tonight.
OK, a horrific attack on a totally defenceless woman. Tell us a bit more about Robin.
Robin was South African originally, very well liked, had a great social life, and was very well respected within the antiques world in London. She'd worked for the same family firm for the last 25 years and become close friends with the owners.
We can now actually hear from the antiques dealer Robin worked for, and as you say, as well as her boss, he was a close family friend.
She's got 2 lovely children who've lost a mother. Lots of lovely friends have lost her. You know, she was very important to all of us, and we've all been very upset. It would be a very good thing if whoever is responsible is caught for the closure for the family and for ourselves, actually.
Now, Paul, there are 2 people seen on CCTV that you really want to trace.
Yeah, at about 9:35, CCTV picks up 2 people walking across the Walton Road towards Robin's address. Now, I know it's not great quality, but we're incredibly keen to trace those 2 people who we believe are vital to our investigation.
And you're also looking for a dog walker who could be a witness, is that right?
Yeah, we believe there's a number of people who would have seen those 2 from the previous CCTV, including this man who's seen walking his 2 dogs at a nearby shop.
Paul, thank you very much indeed. It is clearly vital that anyone with any information calls in tonight, particularly if you witness something or indeed have any idea why someone would want to harm Robin. There's a Crime Stoppers reward of up to £10,000 for information given to them, which leads to the arrest and conviction of whoever is responsible. I'll give you the number now. It's 0800 555 111. Well, we are here in Eltham tonight asking for your help on the Stephen Lawrence case. It was an extreme example of what today we call a hate crime. The referendum in June to leave the EU seemed to trigger an increase of hatred on an unprecedented scale. So we asked one victim whose experiences made news around the world to investigate. Juan Hasso's film contains some of the racist language which he and fellow victims have been subjected to.
What are you, 18? 19? No. I've been here longer than you have. My name is Juan Hasso, and that's me in the clip. I'm not actually from Africa. I'm from the United States, and I've lived here in Britain for the past 18 years and work as a sports lecturer. I want to know why I and others have become targets for abuse since the vote to leave the EU.
The British people have spoken, and the answer is we're out.
June 23rd, 2016, the day the UK voted to leave the EU. Overnight, the face of British politics was transformed. But the vote also triggered a wave of tension and hate. Hate that I experienced firsthand just days after the vote.
Straight away I could hear a lot of vulgar language coming from the second carriage, or the carriage towards the rear. And I just asked them, you know, from about midway to the carriage, you know, hey, do you guys mind watching your language? There's young kids on board, young families, and I didn't want to hear that language either. It was quite a bit of a shock, the response I got, because it instantly turned very nasty for whatever reason.
I was left angry and shaken. But after they left the tram, I thought it was over.
And then about 3.5, 4 hours later, my phone just started ringing. I got loads of text messages. This video had literally gone viral within a few hours.
While my story was making headlines around the world, others in the UK were suffering away from the limelight. Sadaf Akhtar experienced similar abuse just 3 days after Brexit in her hometown of Leicester.
We both kind of came towards each other. I was going to go left, he was going to go right. Both had our windows down, and he used a really insultive gesture with his hand and basically told me to F off, you packy, and go back to where you came from. I was really in shock, to be honest. I couldn't believe what I just heard, and I was literally frozen. For that moment, I felt as if I was back in the 80s and I was experiencing something that I've not experienced for a very, very long while. And I felt slightly vulnerable for a split second there, but that soon went away because it takes a little bit more than that to ruffle my feathers.
Fayaz Mughal is the founder of Tell Mama, an organization set up to help victims of hate like Sadaf. People spouting Islamophobic abuse paralyzed the organization by bringing down their phone lines following the vote.
I hope you wake up on a big time, you black bastard. You terrorist raping bastard. You understand how hated you really are in England? Nobody likes you.
On the days we were targeted, we for about 10, 11 days, we had to pull our phone lines out. Being targeted like that put us in a position where we felt what a victim of hate crimes feels like. Being alone, feeling as if the whole world is against you, and actually feeling extremely vulnerable. It creates a sense of anger if you're targeted because of what you are. If you're a woman, if you're disabled, if you're a member of the LGBT community, if you're black, if you're Jewish, if you are targeted because of something which makes up your DNA, who you are, what you're about, then it does create a sense of extreme anger in people. Why was I targeted for something I can't control?
The hate has been directed at multiple communities, including one in Huntingdon, Cambridgeshire.
I'm trying to be in the community quite often and show my face and speak to the community so they know that we're always out there for them when they need us.
Polish PCSO Aggie Fisher is helping to ease tensions following the spate of abuse and offensive letters targeting members of the Polish community. One of those was 11-year-old Mateusz Wilna.
That's rude because I'm Polish and that's really sad for me.
It's a little horrible because I'm living in this country, pay any taxes, pay everything. Why I must go back home? Yes. My home is now this country, not Poland.
But several months on, the family has been overwhelmed by support from the public.
So you're actually saying that people actually are nicer to you now after what happened?
Yeah, this is...
They're making you feel welcome after what happened?
So one stupid man, don't worry.
Yeah.
That's it.
Oh, it's good. It's good. It makes you feel good as well as your family, and you've got the reassurance.
Because this is my town.
Yeah.
I'm living this, and I die this. Nothing else.
Yeah.
Shocked by my own experiences and hearing the stories of others, I want to know what motivates people to behave this way, and also why Brexit has seemed to have fueled more hatred.
The lead researcher on Britain's biggest study of hate crime victimization is Dr. Stevie Jade Hardy.
In the build-up to the EU referendum, we started talking about groups in ways that were incredibly negative, in ways that started to present this community as being a threat to our way of life, to our standard of living. And so that normalised it, it legitimised it, it brought it to the surface and made people think that this is acceptable.
This feeling of legitimacy is something police are keen to tackle.
The referendum didn't give anybody a licence to commit a hate crime. Let's be really clear about that. You give nobody a licence to do it. There is no justification in this country for any behaviour that is motivated by hate or hostility. There's no justification for it at all. We've got to be saying to ourselves, why does this behaviour occur? It's too late when the police are involved because somebody's already been victimised. They're already hurt. They're already suffering. So we've got to ask ourselves, why homophobic behaviour? Why xenophobic behaviour? Why Islamophobia? And see what we can do as a community to address those issues before they become a hate incident or a hate crime.
One good thing that seems to have come from all of this has been an increase in bystanders coming forward to report hate crimes.
There is something positive, and I use positive in the sense that the person taking the film feels comfortable enough to take the film and secure enough to take the film to be able to collect that evidence. Then there's something good in that. There's something positive in being an upstander. It's about people saying, I don't think this is acceptable.
As a nation, we should think we're one body. If your arm hurts or your finger hurts, the whole body feels it. So it's the same thing. When we start working together, we can move mountains, really. Because it's affecting, our children's future to some respects, but we'll get through this. We're British, we'll all get through this.
If you head to our website, you can see more clips on the subject and find help and advice. You might want to know that victims of any crime can also speak to victim support. They are on 0808 16 89 111. Right, still to come tonight, the hunt for the cold-blooded killers of a car salesman, gunned down in broad daylight.
It was life taken away for, to me, no reason whatsoever. No reason. He was just a good family man.
But we've got wanted faces first, starting with 34-year-old Michael Leslie Johnston, although you may know him as Mark McCaffrey or Dean McHale. He was jailed for 17 years in 2009 for wounding with intent and released early on licence, but he's failed to stick to his conditions and is now wanted back in prison. Johnston is missing an upper tooth and has small scars to the back of his head and left shin. He has a Liverpudlian accent and links to the northwest of England and the Isle of Man. This is Castle Gale, or Squid as he also calls himself. He was arrested by detectives investigating drug dealing in the Southampton area and released on bail, but Gale has failed to return. He's described as being of heavy build and has links to London and Southampton. He had his 23rd birthday yesterday. Face number 3 is 23-year-old Talha Khan. He was arrested by detectives investigating the kidnap of a man and the assault of a woman in Grimsby, but failed to return for further questioning. Khan also uses the names Alex, T, Jan and Rigger and has links to the West Midlands, Coventry, Nottingham, Grimsby, Cardiff and Glasgow. And finally for now is 37-year-old Donald Joseph George Richardson, although he also calls himself Donald Stewart, Mark Joseph Owens or David Walton Richardson. He was jailed for 5 years after forcing his way into a woman's home and sexually assaulting her. Richardson was put on the sex offenders register but has failed to stick to his conditions and is now wanted back in jail. His arms are heavily scarred and he has tattoos of the words mum and dad on his wrists. Originally from Northern Ireland, he's known around homeless shelters, especially in Leeds, Manchester and Blackpool town centres. If you know where any of tonight's faces might be, please do get in touch using the numbers on screen. We'll go through the rest of the lineup a little later.
It is just over a decade since grandfather Jim Stanton was locking up at the garage where he worked in Aintree on the outskirts of Liverpool when 2 armed men burst in and shot him dead. The case is all the more tragic as police are convinced Jim was not the intended target.
That's where his life ended, in that car showroom. Jim was taken from us that day. And that's when all our lives fell apart. He doted on his children. His grandchildren were his life. Every time we'd be even going on holiday, he'd say to me, right, which ones are we taking this time? We had 7 grandchildren, another one on the way. And yes, his life was his grandchildren and his children.
In 2006, Jim Stanton was working at Aintree Commercial Vehicles in Liverpool as a sales manager.
Jim was never, ever out of work, ever in his life. He did everything. He did all the advertising. He was a very, very good car salesman. He had the gift of the gab.
Aintree Commercials, can I help?
He wasn't happy there. Only, let's say, a week before, he'd gone to look at premises to then start up again in his own business. Unfortunately, that never happened.
On Monday, July the 24th, 2006, Jim was shutting up shop at around 6 p.m. He would usually have finished earlier, but a few of his colleagues were running late.
I spoke to my husband probably about half an hour before the incident, and he said, "Oh, I'm sorry, Love, I'm going to be a little bit late coming home from work tonight.
Hey, love, you all right? Yeah, we're winding up now.
And that was the last I heard.
As they were locking up, 2 armed men stormed into the yard. They had come to kill. The first few shots hit the showroom window before the pair moved inside and continued firing. His colleagues ran for cover, but Jim, who was sitting behind his desk, was trapped. He took the full force of the shots.
I was driving home from work that evening when I got the phone call from his brother to say that my husband had been in some sort of accident. I remember them coming to say, quick, you better hurry up and go and say goodbyes. Going from me waving goodbye to him going out the door in the morning, nothing wrong with him, and then lying there, his life taken away from, to me, no reason whatsoever. No reason. He was just a good family man. Taken from us. And I want to know why.
It's been 10 years, but these 2 killers caught on camera have yet to be traced. The motivation for their organised hit also remains a mystery.
10 years on, the anger is there because my husband can't see his grandchildren growing up, missing out on so much of a life that he would have been so proud of. You just want to try and not forget, but come to terms with the situation in a different way. I honestly don't know how, but I'm sure if we did get some answers, I think life would be different.
Detectives are convinced the gunmen were targeting someone else. An innocent man taken needlessly from his family.
Please help us now. Move forward. Put closure. He will always be fondly remembered as a loving, caring dad, granddad, friend. Always.
Well, we're joined now by Detective Superintendent Dave Brunskill from Merseyside Police, and you don't think Jim was the target, do you?
Yes, it was unclear who was actually the subject of the attack. What we know is there was a number of people in the garage at the time, and certainly the 2 gunmen approached the premises and then indiscriminately fired into the premises towards the occupants. It's incredible that nobody else was killed or seriously injured.
Any idea then why the business was targeted?
No, and clearly what I want to establish is what was the motive behind the shooting. Not only after information around the gunman, but also who was responsible for coordinating and organising the murder. Allegiances have changed, and we'd like people to come forward.
The gunmen were caught, weren't they, Dave, on CCTV? Do you think that since then they might even have spoken about it to someone?
Undoubtedly, we believe that people locally will know who was responsible and who these 2 gunmen are, and we would urge those individuals to come forward.
Tell us then about the getaway car they used.
The getaway car was a blue Toyota Avensis. That vehicle was stolen approximately 2 months before the actual incident. It was a registration number DA53MKK, and it was stolen from Sefton Street near to the city centre. What I'm interested in is where that vehicle was, who sold it on, and where it was leading up to the actual murder itself.
And there's a link to a second vehicle, is that right?
Yes, that's also right. The blue Toyota Avensis was driven to a rural area out in St Helens called Blindfoot Road. The vehicle was dumped and set alight. We believe that this vehicle, a black Vectra KN53YHL, may have been linked to the actual scene where the other vehicle was set on fire. This vehicle was stopped in the area of Latham Road in Huyton, and we're keen to know who was in that vehicle.
And large reward here, I gather.
Yes, Merseyside Police are putting forward the reward of £20,000 for information leading to the arrest and the prosecution of the offenders.
Thank you very much, Detective. If you have any idea who the gunman might be, then please call now on 08 085 600 600. So, still to come tonight, how detectives finally caught up with Melanie Rhodes' killer thanks to a breakthrough in forensic science.
I was sat at my terminal and a message comes up from the lab. It's a full DNA hit.
I was on holiday and it just didn't sink in. I was like, a hit? And then suddenly it hit me and I couldn't believe it. I was ecstatic. It was, oh my God, Melanie, we've actually done it for you.
More wanted faces now, starting with Leon Davis. Detectives in Derbyshire want to question him after two women were assaulted at a party. One was also hit by a car, suffering a fractured skull. Davis is 34 and has a tattoo of the name Kelsey on his neck and a number of scars on his right leg and arm. He has links to Derby, Nottingham, London and Norfolk and is known to be a prolific user of social media. Next is this man, Michael Walker. Detectives want to question him in connection with a number of thefts from jewellers across the country. He's 31 and has a Liverpudlian accent, a scar on the right side of his head and the name Kelly Hunter tattooed inside his right wrist. He travels extensively by train to Devon, Cornwall, Derby, Preston and North Yorkshire. Number 7 is Antjaho Akpomadaye, although you may know him as Dele Desmond or Kevin Richards. Detectives in Hertfordshire want to question him in connection to over 100 bank accounts which are believed to have received more than £900,000 from cyber-related fraud. Akpomadaye is 42, he's originally from Nigeria, but now has links to Bournemouth, Essex, Oxford, Newcastle and across London. He's 5'4" and softly spoken. And finally, this is David Brown, although he uses numerous other names, including David Kerrigan, James Dunn and the surnames Crawley and Doyle. Detectives in Hertfordshire want to question him in connection to a number of distraction burglaries. Brown is 36 and has links across the southeast of England. He has a tribal tattoo on his stomach and scars on his left forearm. If you know where any of tonight's faces are, please get in touch using the numbers on screen. And of course, they are all on the Crimewatch website.
Now, the culmination of how detectives solved one of the UK's longest-running investigations. Melanie Rhodes was just 17 when she was attacked on her way home from a nightclub in Bath in 1984. For 3 decades, a killer has hidden among us.
You get these hairs standing up on the back of your neck thinking, this looks quite good.
Relentlessly pursued by police.
I just knew that I was going to solve it.
This is the inside story of that investigation, the hunt for Melanie Rhodes' killer. On Friday the 8th of June 1984, 17-year-old Melanie Rhodes was on a night out in Bath. She left the nightclub at around 1:15 a.m. to walk home. But on her way, she was attacked. The teenager was raped and stabbed 26 times. Heartbreakingly, her body was found just 200 yards from her home, where she lived with her parents. Avon and Somerset police began a relentless manhunt, arresting 94 people in their search for the killer. Extensive forensic work was done around the offender's blood trail leading away from the scene. And the arrival of DNA into police investigations in 1988 moved the case along. Scientists made full use of every leap in technology, and a partial DNA profile of the killer was retrieved and checked against the national database. But no match was found. Despite the setback, 25 years after the murder, police were still determined to crack the case, so turned to Crimewatch.
If you had suspicions around about the time, but you didn't call the police, now is the time to do it if you think you can help. Please pick up the phone.
investigators never anticipated the result they would get.
Very, very important witness that came forward from Crimewatch confirmed really the age, the height, the ethnicity of the offender. He saw Melanie having an argument with someone in the area of St Stephen's Road. He parked his vehicle up, and as he was walking back, he sees the man who was arguing with Melanie running towards him. He even spoke to the man, and the man, he said to the man, "Have you just had an argument with your girlfriend?" And the man said yes, and ran off down these steps. And our witness saw him go all the way down the steps and into Camden Crescent, which is where the blood trail went.
He gave police a rough sketch of the offender based on his memory from 25 years before. It was a significant new clue, but why was this witness not spoken to at the time? Detectives had, in fact, come agonizingly close. In the days after Melanie's murder, police made house-to-house inquiries in the area. Incredibly, those initial inquiries had stopped just 2 doors away from their witness's house. Just 2 doors away from potentially crucial information.
That's why he was never identified immediately at the time, and a full story got from him then. He would then have been able to potentially produce a photo fit of the offender while it was fresh in his mind, and who knows.
Frustratingly, nothing came of the sketch, and the team were faced with another dead end. The Melanie Road murder investigation was fast becoming one of the most agonizing unsolved cases in Britain. For too long, the killer had disappeared under the radar. But in 2009, Julie Mackay took over as senior investigating officer and vowed that she would find him and get justice for Melanie.
Like everyone who'd gone before me and everyone who I worked with at the time, I wanted to be part of the team that solved it. And I find it really difficult to explain, but as time went on, I just knew that I was going to solve it. I just had this gut instinct. We've got compelling evidence. All you needed was the other bit that was going to join it up, which was your suspect. The hard bit was, where on earth were we going to find him?
The team turned to the names linked to the original investigation. Over 8,500 people. Based on all the information gathered so far, they honed the list down to the most likely possible suspects and visited them to take a DNA sample. In the meantime, scientists continued to work on extracting the killer's full DNA profile.
What struck me was the fact that there was a swab that presumptively attested strongly for the presence of semen, but we hadn't obtained a DNA profile as such from it. Another thing that became evident to me is that we didn't have a profile at that stage of Melanie herself, which when you're trying to find the DNA of the offender, you need to subtract the DNA of the victim.
Having built a DNA profile for Melanie, forensic scientists used the swab they'd had in storage since 1984 to finally obtain a full DNA profile of the killer. In the intervening years, thousands of new names had been added to the national DNA database, and a new technique had been developed to flag up possible relatives of a suspect, so-called familial DNA. The team were hopeful.
What they'll say is the likelihood of the suspect being linked to that person who's arrested is, and then they give you a ratio. And what we do is we look at that name on the list, and it could be, say, John Smith or Julie Mackay. Okay, so who's Julie Mackay's dad? Because we're looking for a man. We know that he's going to be older than her because of the age of our crime scene. And so we do some work around Julie Mackay.
A search of the database was made in 2009, but it offered no matches to a suspect or their relatives. The team tried again in 2011. And this time, the results were very different.
There was a name at the top of the list, was a female, whose likelihood ratio was well over 2 times the next nearest person. Everyone got excited, It's known in the business as a screamer. It's screaming out at you. She was someone who was on the parent-child list, so we knew it was father. It couldn't be brother.
The scientists are saying, yep, looking at this profile of the relative, 97.5% sure it's going to be him, and everybody's like, oh my God.
Some of our senior crime officers, one in particular, was absolutely convinced we would get a hit, which made all of us convinced we were going to get a hit until the phone call came through and it was, this is not your man.
Somebody said they'd stake their mortgage on it being him, and it wasn't. I was like, oh.
So, yeah, we were a bit deflated on that day.
The team was still no closer. Another 4 years passed. In 2015, they tried again. This time, they found an even closer match to a potential relative of the murderer.
I'm thinking, well, if this person's even more likely, then this has got to be a good shout. The other thing which stood out, that person, place of birth, Bath.
A woman had recently been arrested for a minor offence. Gary contacted her and she willingly gave her father's details.
I met him on the morning of the 1st of June. Parked in the car park. Phoned him up on his mobile. He came across to the car. I got out of the car, shook his hand, introduced myself. He behaved no different from anyone else. No more, no less nervous. So I then took the 2 swabs that I needed to. He went off to work and they were sent off within a few days awaiting the result. I was sat at my terminal trying to track more people down, and a message comes up from the lab. It's a full DNA hit.
I was on holiday and Gary rang me, and it just didn't sink in. I was like, a hit? And then suddenly it hit me, and I couldn't believe it. I was ecstatic. It was, oh my God, Melanie, we've actually done it for you.
The man the DNA profile belonged to, and the one they'd been searching so long for, was 63-year-old Christopher Hampton. He was arrested on the 2nd of July, 31 years after he murdered Melanie Road. After killing her, he'd gone on to marry and raise a family in Bristol. When questioned by police, he refused to cooperate.
You've been expecting this for 30-odd years?
No comment.
Or did you honestly believe you had got away with the murder of a 17-year-old girl in Bath back in 1984?
No comment.
It came out of the blue, really. I mean, I was like a dog with 2 tails when I heard this. It was excellent news.
Hopefully, after such a long time, the family would finally get some form, albeit no doubt small, some form of closure.
On the 9th of May 2016, Christopher Hampton finally admitted his guilt in court. As the judge sentenced him to life in prison with a minimum of 22 years, he said Hampton had been too callous and cowardly to come forward and put an end to the family's misery sooner. He added that Hampton will most likely die in prison. After decades of torment for Melanie's family, they finally have an answer. At the time, her mother Jean gave this rare interview.
Because I'm 81, I thought I might be dead before it all finalised, but thank God. I said to the police, well, I'll be 80 next year. If you don't find this man, I don't think I can last. And you did it, didn't you? Thank you.
There is no getting over such a loss, such a death. Since her death, she's been a statistic, a crime to be solved, a court case. But she's my sister, she's a person. She deserved to be remembered for herself. Not a single day passes without me thinking about her.
Over the years, many people played their part in bringing Hampton to justice, often not knowing where their work would lead or if the case would ever be solved.
In 1984, they would never have anticipated that we could do all this. But what they did do was that really, really good detective work which set us up, so as the science developed, we could use it.
I consider it like a relay race, and all that's happened over the years, a baton has been passed on to the next people. We just happen to have the baton when we cross the line.
Despite pleading guilty, Christopher Hampton has never revealed why he killed Melanie Rode.
I'd like him to tell us what happened, really. What made him do that? Was there something? And could we use that knowledge now to stop that happening to somebody else? And that would be fantastic.
But Hampton remains silent behind bars. A truly despicable crime, but justice served at last. Just time before we go for a quick update on your calls with Tina.
Yeah, lots of calls coming into the officers here. Chris is in charge of the Stephen Lawrence murder investigation. Yes. Has any new information come in for you?
Some very interesting calls tonight. I'm very grateful for people ringing in. But if anybody has got any specific information of why the strap was at the scene, or who is the female owner of that strap, please bring in.
Who's not necessarily a suspect.
No, I must stress that she is a witness. There is no evidence to suggest a woman is involved in the murder of Stephen Lawrence.
And some key CCTV as well.
Yeah, absolutely. If anybody can identify the male with the distinctive V jacket, please ring in. We really need to identify him, please.
OK, Chris, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Yes. Oh, right, OK.
Well, that is everything for now on BBC One, but you can follow all of the developments on our new Live Updates webpage. Head there for the latest from the detectives as they chase up all the calls still coming in. The phone lines stay open until midnight tomorrow. Do keep dialing. Lots more to come next week, including an alarming investigation into why so many of Britain's youngsters are carrying knives.
I used to carry my knife basically solely for the means of security and influence over people. And it always worked. I never used to leave the house without my knife. It was like putting on socks for me.
That's coming next week, Monday at 9 on BBC One. But for now, thank you so much for all your calls. They really do make a difference. From everyone here, good night.